So welcome everyone. I'm Claire Hopkinson. I'm the Director and CEO of the Toronto Arts Council, Toronto Arts Foundation. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Big thank you to David Kalenda, who is providing ASL interpretation for us today. Anyone needing ASL interpretation can pin David's video block so that it is the largest on their screen. You need the speaker's view selected in the top right-hand corner in order to do this. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's session, Maxime Bailey. Maxime is an extraordinary leader in Toronto arts sector. She serves on a number of boards and committees across the city, including the board of Toronto Arts Council. She is the founder of the Toronto International Film Festival's 5-year campaign focused on gender parity, Share Her Journey, garnering international recognition for creating a more equitable film industry. Maxime is a cultural curator, moderator, host, juror, general disruptor, and a genuine joy for us to have here today.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Hello, and thank you all for joining us today. As we continue to cope with the crisis of COVID-19, I'm struck by our resilience in so many ways. This global pandemic has brought to surface inequities that have existed for many generations. It has drawn attention to the need to gather and to share resources, but also the need to listen to the experiences of those around us. Today, I'm speaking to you from Takaranto, which has been the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe Nation, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This land has been shared under the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, which reminds us that we are all responsible for taking only what we need and respecting the needs of others. As we discuss the next phase of reopening today, I encourage you all to think past the goal of returning to normal and to instead ask yourself how this next phase of operational adjustment can be used to make our sector more equitable and accessible for your audiences and employees alike. The structure for today's session: Claire Hopkinson, the Director, TAC Director and CEO, will come back with an update from the TAC. Sally Hahn, the Manager of Cultural Partnerships for the City of Toronto, will provide an update from Economic Development and Culture. David Absalom, Toronto Urban Fellow from the City of Toronto, and Matt Oates, Manager Event Support, City of Toronto, will come back with an update on reopening process. Then we will go to previously submitted questions, which our panelists will respond to. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Claire Hopkinson.
Oh, thanks, Maxime. I'm going to keep my update very brief, but I want to draw your attention to a few initiatives that I believe will be helpful to those on the call today. First is Lights On. So as Dr. Chris Gibbs noted from last month's digital update for those who attended, Ryerson University, Toronto Arts Council, and the city is working with a number of different live entertainment-based organizations on a project called Lights On, Recovery and Reboot in the live entertainment. Currently, the work will focus on venues and public spaces to develop an opening guide that is specific to Toronto and Ontario, and its goal is to be published in the fall, and that's for when more than 50 people can collect in one space at a time. TAPA, Toronto Alliance for the Performing Arts, is also hard at work preparing a guide to reopening for their members, and they're hoping to have that available by the end of the summer. So TAPA and their staff have been working very hard, delivering surveys, collecting information on the impact that COVID-19 has had so far in Toronto's artists and arts organization. So TAC will be happy to share those results and resources from TAPA when they become finalized. So as always, Toronto Arts Council is committed to working closely with the City of Toronto, but also indeed with all levels of government, both to advocate and to get resources, ideas, and information out to Toronto artists in as timely a manner as possible. The reality is there'll likely be multiple waves of loosening and tightening restrictions until a vaccine is publicly available. And so we'll want to keep on top of it. And I know this is a very difficult time for you all. And I want to reassure you that we are all working as hard as we can to help wherever it is possible to do so, particularly with an eye to Toronto's most vulnerable artists and arts workers. So as we all look forward to the future to begin planning for reopening, I want to note that we must not stop the work that has been done to combat inequities in our processes, assumptions, and practices. It's everybody's responsibility to engage in the dialogue about anti-Black racism, Indigenous rights, and the shortfalls of our existing practices. These and other human rights are fundamental to the arts, and I hope that we can work together to continue to listen, adjust, and build a stronger sector as an outcome of this pandemic. So now it's time to welcome Sally Han to share an update with us from the City of Toronto. Sally.
Thanks, Claire, and hi everyone. I'm Sally Han from the City of Toronto's Economic Development and Culture team. I'd like to give you a quick update since the last town hall 4 weeks ago. I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me? I suddenly realized, I hope I'm not muted. I wanted to give you a update on what's been happening in the last 4 weeks. So 4 weeks ago on June 24th, Toronto had just entered into stage 2 reopening, and there have been a lot of important movements since then. So masks became mandatory indoors in Toronto on July 7th. And then as of July 13th, Camp TO launched, and our colleagues in museums, parks, and rec centers have started up day camps for small groups of children. Pools and rec centers have opened with modified access and facilities as of this week. And the Van Gogh Immersive Experience opened. Drive-in movie and concert venues were announced and started operating. And the operating guidelines for safe drive-in venues were published. So we are trying to get things moving again, but we recognize that for a lot of arts and culture organizations, recovery is still a ways off. The Toronto Office of Recovery and Rebuild, led by Saad Rafi and Dr. David Mowat, has been consulting with many, many different social, cultural, and economic sectors. And I'm sure many of you have been invited to some of those consultations. And they are preparing a report to go to City Council in the fall. So we've been in stage 2 reopening for about 4 weeks now, and it looks like we'll be in stage 3 soon, although in the GTA, we don't know exactly when. And that's the core of our session today. But before I hand off to my colleagues, there's just a few things I'd like to bring to your attention, some good news things. So first, on Friday, July the 10th, the Year of Public Arts brand, Artworks TO, was launched, as was the partnership program. And that partnership program is the city seeking to partner with organizations to animate and celebrate art in public spaces and spaces all year across the city. So please go to the website, download the application, and read the program criteria. Grants of up to $100,000 will be dispersed through a competitive process, and the applications will be selected by a committee. So also help us to get the word out. The deadline for submissions is September the 10th. The Toronto Book Awards has extended its submission deadline to the end of the month on July 31st. The original deadline was April 30th, but the pandemic delayed things, and now we're going ahead. That's a $10,000 award to the winner and $1,000 to each runner-up. And just to be clear, the Toronto Book Awards accepts all kinds of published books from publishers: poetry, nonfiction, essay collections, short stories, novels, plays, graphic novels, monographs. We've even had coloring books, although I don't think a coloring book has ever won. But next Friday is the final day for submissions. Also next week, the live music venues who applied to be included in the Creative Co-locations Facilities Property Tax subclass, the list of those properties will be going to council for approval. And I'm really pleased to tell you that over 50 live music venues applied to that program. And for the first year rollout of that, we're really, really happy with the level of uptake. So as we all know, paying taxes are absolutely necessary to functioning civilizations. And the laws governing taxes are really, really complicated. There's been a huge amount of collaboration between city divisions, revenue services, real estate services, economic development, culture, as well as the province with their MPAC agency. So we were really pleased with the response, and we hope that this means many of the live music venues survive the pandemic and are able to recover. There's also been terrific take-up on the Cultural Festivals Recovery Program, and that's a funding program that we launched in May. Our total requests now far exceed the available grants. So at the end of this month, we're probably going to have to close the intake and just process the applications we already have submitted. In other words, if you're thinking of making an application, you have to have submitted yours by 5 p.m. on the computer system that we use, TGRIP, because it looks like we're out of money. So originally, we had $425,000 to disperse, but we've received $750,000 in requests already. There have been about 60 applications, and grants have ranged from around $8,000 to a maximum of $25,000, depending on the size and scope. We've allocated about $250,000 now, so there's less than $250,000 left. Most grants have been in the range of around $10,000 to $15,000. However, that program also had an invitation to festival and event producers to learn from our partners, FOREC and BAM, about the design of safe gatherings in the future, and there will be webinars coming up in August. So I think that's a great segue to my colleagues, David Absalon and Matt Otis, who have been working all summer with Toronto Public Health to serve you. And so thanks, everybody. Oh, David, over to you.
Thanks, everyone. Hello. Rachel, if you don't mind, can you put up the slideshow? Thank you. So thanks for joining us for round 2 of this town hall. I'm David Absalom, and I'm joined with Matt Oates to talk about reopening and what that means. Next slide, please. So as many of you may know, the province is continuing its gradual staged approach to reopening and restarting the economy as outlined in their framework for reopening Ontario. Just to quickly recap, so the province has outlined 3 phases. So phase 1, protect and support, was where we saw the provincial government putting these emergency orders in place. Then phase 2, restart, our current phase, where the province is taking a 3-staged approach to loosening the emergency measures put in place by the emergency order and begin to reopen Ontario. And then phase 3 will be the recovery phase, where we'll transition to living in this new normal. So phase 3 is not to be confused with stage 3. So we are waiting to enter stage 3. So as a part of phase 2 and restart, the province announced that they would be taking a regional approach to easing the restrictions in communities where they deemed it was safe to do so. Building on this regional approach in stage 2, different regions will move into stage 3 when it's safe to do so. In Toronto, we're currently in stage 2. Next slide, please. So where are we? So with that being said, again, Toronto's currently in stage 2. As such, the city has canceled all city-led and city-permitted outdoor special events until September the 30th. So this announcement includes festivals and other large gatherings held at outdoor sites managed by the City of Toronto or other public locations. It does not include permitted activities issued by the City of Toronto's Parks, Forestry, and Recreation Division in parks and other city facilities or sites, which were permitted in stage 2 as a part of the province's framework for reopening. So when the emergency order changes, or if it changes, I should say, the city will adjust and issue permits in accordance to the provincial direction. Next slide, please. So when the time comes to enter phase 3, all businesses and public will reopen. So we'll also see that indoor gathering limits will increase to a maximum of 50 people and outdoor gatherings to a maximum of 100 people. In all cases, individuals will be required to continue to maintain physical distancing of at least 2 meters with people from outside their households or their social circles. So all of the businesses, services, and public spaces that will be hosting an event are subject to the indoor or outdoor gathering limits and ensuring that physical distancing is maintained. People at their place of work, so this includes performers, crews, and etc., do not meet or do not count towards the gathering limits. And then a quick note, even though the gathering limits will increase eventually, your social circles should be kept to 10 people province-wide, regardless of the stage that we're entering. So next slide, please. So based off of the advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Health and other public health experts, the gathering limits apply to higher risk settings or activities where people will congregate. So this will include all organized or spontaneous indoor and outdoor events and social gatherings. So whether it's parties, fundraisers, fairs, or receptions. Also includes concerts, live shows, which include the performing arts, and festivals and other recreational activities such as going to the gym, and plenty of others that are listed above. So that's a bit of an update on my end. Off to you, Matt.
Can everybody hear me? Sorry, I'm just double checking this. Yeah. So thanks, David, for that. And so just to add a little bit to what David was talking about, given COVID-19 is a fluid situation, we wanted to advise that the City of Toronto guidance and the responses that we're talking about today are all fluid. And as such, the information we are seeing today will continue to evolve as we move through the pandemic in phase 2, stage 3, and also enter into future phases of reopening. There is no magic bullet or one-size-fits-all answer for cultural events and venues, as each has unique characteristics, and the locations change in size and scope. So the response has to be tailored to those types of situations. So when you look at additional considerations, so based on community needs, the City of Toronto, in consultation with the Medical Officer of Health, can exercise their authority for more restrictions or requirements if needed. So the province sets out the mandate for what is required as part of phase 2, stage 3 reopening. However, the city does have some ability to add additional conditions to those if they see fit, or work with the provincial government to address those. So those could change. Even with what we're seeing today in stage 3 reopening, there are people petitioning the provincial government to potentially change some of those restrictions. So we have to wait and see how those play out. The City of Toronto will, moving forward, continue to advise on future event cancellations between October and December 2020 and beyond, should the needs arise, and in accordance with provincial orders surrounding mass gathering limits and restrictions. So as David mentioned previously, if they do raise those mass gathering limits, we can relook at what permits can and cannot be issued, provided they take public health and safety into account and are addressed through public health channels. There is a bit of a sense that there may be some businesses and sectors that are either not able to reopen in stage 3 or are having challenges opening in stage 3. So the province at ontario.ca reopen has a link where you can submit a reopening proposal if you're continuing to have challenges with the restrictions that you're seeing based in stage 3. Provincial government officials will work collaboratively with those businesses or organizations to explore how they might safely resume operations as Ontario gradually reopens, while implementing public health measures and workplace guidance. Slide. So in terms of city permitting, so the City of Toronto permitting divisions can consider permitting requests for small events through regular application processes in line with the province of Ontario's gathering limit restrictions in stage 3 of the provincial framework. So looking at the public realm, you have permits from transportation services for street closures, you have parks permits for utilization of parks, and then you will have some areas like civic squares and or civic spaces that can potentially be permitted through the various permitting divisions. As you submit a permit application, it should be noted that it does, just because you've submitted an application does not guarantee issuance of a permit. Again, we have to be extremely careful given that we are still in the midst of the pandemic. And so groups are looking at the applications by division, working with event organizers who would be submitting to look through those plans that they submit. And this is the point I would like to drive home is that as the organizers of potential permitting events in public realm spaces, the city and Toronto Public Health can provide considerations and temporary guidance for those types of events. However, it falls to the organizers to figure out how those plans fit into what it is they are proposing. And that onus does fall to the organizer. So each permitting division will look at activities being proposed and discuss directly with the applicant, and you can discuss questions, concerns, otherwise with them. Again, they may not have all the answers. We are figuring this out as we go along with you, so bear with us as we do that. And then COVID-19 mitigation and safety measures are a new consideration as part of divisional event permitting. However, don't replace any pre-existing divisional permit requirements, health and safety practices, or conditions that may be imposed. Now, having said all of that, and again, just for clarity, although permitting of small events in public realm spaces by city divisions can take place in line with provincial gathering limits, the reality is that the onus of preparing appropriate health and safety mitigation plans in line with provincial reopening framework and local public health guidance falls to the organizer of the event. The city division will not be able to issue permits if it poses a public health risk and has a potential high risk of transmission. And the burden of addressing that concern to the divisional permitting offices satisfaction can again fall to those who are requesting permits. With a second wave as a possibility, we all need to remain extra vigilant in our efforts to ensure safe events and environments for the general public. Slide. So just to continue very quickly, these are just some final notes on this topic. So the City of Toronto public realm spaces like indoor civic centers, meeting rooms, and community spaces may continue to be unavailable for use to the general public. A full list does not currently exist, so speak directly with the permitting division who will advise on availability. And then these are some resources that you can go to on the web, and I believe we'll be circulating this deck after the presentation. So you can go to the events planning information site, which has a list of topic areas that you can then click on, and those topic areas have links to permitting information, contacts, and applications. There's also booking special events in parks and recreation centers, which is a link that is contained within there, as well as separately on the Parks, Forestry, and Recreation site. So you can click on that and find more information. Applying for a street event permit. This one here, I just wanted to speak about specifically. The challenge with street event permits with a gathering limit of about 100 people is very difficult. When you close off a street, the onus is not only about protecting the inner part of the street, it's about passerby traffic. So how can you put on a street closure event and manage that 100-person gathering limit? And that's something that will probably make it a little bit more difficult to get street closure permits for events that could potentially draw large amounts of people. And then noise exemption permits are pretty straightforward. And again, just a note that should provincial emergency orders change, the city will adjust and issue permits in accordance with the provincial direction. So if you're considering presenting something in the public round, you can find information on permitting here and reach out directly to the divisional contacts. David, back to you and slide.
Thanks, Matt. So since the city's role is to really enforce the policies that have been set in place by the province, as many of you already know, EDC has been working with Toronto Public Health over the past couple of months to work on guiding and supporting the cultural sector during reopening. So this has mainly looked like producing these guidance documents and recommendations that have been vetted by Toronto Public Health to support your reopening efforts. So we wanted to really make sure that all of the guidance and recommendations are grounded in evidence and adhere to the current directives. But again, it's not a source of approval. There's no official office that will approve from the city that you're good to reopen. And the guidance documents, they do have some operational considerations for indoor and outdoor events that now include concerts and live shows. So I would really highly recommend that folks go on Toronto Public Health's website and really review some of those documents. And in addition to that, to prepare for stage 3, the provincial government has also partnered with Ontario's health and safety associations and has released over 100 health and safety document resources that cover a wide range of topics and workplaces. So again, that's another great place to start reviewing and planning your reopening efforts. Next slide, please. In addition to this, you can also see Toronto Public Health has increased the number, or actually posted a whole lot more of guidance documents that speak to COVID transmission, general protective measures, and how to have a healthy operation. So that may also be of use to folks. And then off to you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. So one big thing on the public health guidance. So that document that we're referring to, there is guidance in general from public health, but there is one more specific to cultural venue reopenings that is just currently under review, and we hope to have either out later tomorrow or early next week, hopefully coinciding with an announcement from the province if they decide to put us into stage 3. So bear with us while we get that up. And again, I think we can send this link that you see in the document with regards to public health will actually take you to the page where that document will be housed. So when that does go live, you'll be able to find it there. So I just wanted to add that to that piece. So slide, please. So we're coming to the end of our presentation, but we wanted to go over just a couple things. Obviously, there is a lot of ambiguity in everything that we're talking about here. So in terms of how do you get more information and how can you work with the city to see what may or may not be possible? Rachel, if you could click on the link, please. So the City of Toronto, through Economic Development and Cultural Business and Growth Services, has set up a centralized sector support call center. And as such, you can go to this page, put in your information with your question, and then within 24 hours, someone will be in touch with you to actually discuss what your issue may be, and then where possible, answer questions and or redirect them to the appropriate services. So I think this is pretty self-explanatory in terms of what it is. And so you can submit it there, and that is actually live now. So if you have any questions, please submit information there, and we'll get back to you in as quick as possible we can. Rachel, back to the slide presentation. And then, oh, sorry. And then finally, there is also an email link there for an email called Cultural TO Support. And that is at the very bottom. One more slide, Rachel. There you go. cultureto@toronto.ca. And we have about 4 or 5 staff members who have access to that. And that is also somewhere where you can go if you have quick follow-up questions in regards to things that you may need answers to in a timely fashion. So you can access those, and those are live now. Slide, please. And then finally, just a reminder that in terms of responsibility, the responsibility of reopening is that of the proponent, and this includes understanding the provincial orders and regulations, as well as assessing risks associated with reopening events, and actively implementing public health measures to keep employees, clients, and the general public safe. So just note that when you're looking at things, the guidance that we've walked through very gingerly today is the considerations that you as organizers need to look at when planning events, be it in the public realm or in your venues. And if there is any ambiguity that you need clarity on, that's when you can access with either the city or the province. And I believe that takes us to questions.
So I would like to say thank you, Claire, Sally, David, and Matt. We have received some thoughtful questions from people who registered. So a number of those which were duplicated. For today's session, we've invited artists to ask the questions that will help them in preparation for their live events. I'm happy to welcome 6 individuals to join us on the screen and to give a brief context about their plans and ask a question of the panel. We ask that each artist keep this context under 2 minutes so that there is time to hear from everyone. And in addition, we know a lot of you will have a lot more questions because this seems to be the year of, change and pivot and ambiguity. So please enter them into the chat function. And if we have time, we'll move on to those. But now I am happy to welcome Charles Hong, who will ask our first question.
Hi, my name is Charles Hong, and I'm the artistic director of Ensemble Jengi, a traditional Korean performing arts company here in Toronto. Our planned performance is part of Arts in the Park Toronto, a summer arts initiative organized by the Toronto Arts Foundation. We have titled our project the Prince's Park Balcony Concerts. The 6 members of our ensemble will perform a 45-minute program of drumming, music, and dance in Prince's Park, a very intimate park located steps from North York Center subway station. One of the reasons we've chosen this park is because there are 4 condominium buildings literally overlooking the park, providing an instant audience of potentially 100 people who could enjoy the performance from the comfort and safety of their balconies with members of their immediate social bubbles. To reduce the potential of unmanageable numbers of spectators, especially on the ground floor, we will promote our performance only to the residents of these condos, encouraging them to enjoy the performance from their balconies. However, our performance will likely attract passersby. What measures, my question is sort of twofold. What measures should we take to keep everyone safe to ensure the ground floor spectators practice social distancing? Now, I can imagine much of this can be addressed in the Toronto Public Health Guidance document that was mentioned a few minutes ago. But more importantly, if spectators fail to follow pandemic bylaws and orders and are ticketed, would there be any legal risk to our ensemble or any of the organizers? Does any of our performance insurance offer us any kind of protection? Thank you very much for this opportunity to ask my question.
Who wants to take that question?
It's Matt here. I'll take that question, Maxine. Thank you for your question and thanks for attending today. Sounds like a great initiative that you're looking to undertake on behalf of the community, so I congratulate you on that. I'll answer your second question first in terms of the liability and insurance. I can't speak to your insurance clauses. You'd have to talk about that directly with your insurance provider in terms of what it would look like. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I would say in terms of liability, depending on what you are doing, there is always a potential for some sense of liability. My question, I guess, would be is if you're permitting out the park, there definitely is a liability there, and that is why Parks, Forestry, and Recreation would require insurance as part of what you are doing. To answer your first question, I would say there is no, again, no silver bullet for what you're doing. And I have to be honest, I'm not extremely familiar with the park you're referring to. But in general, there are potentially things you can do like cordoning off the park to create an area where pedestrians can't stop and watch it. But I also think there are opportunities to work with the local community response division of your policing unit to make them aware of what you're doing and have them in the area just to support if we do see large numbers of people gathering. Based on the type of activity that it sounds like you're doing, which sounds fabulous, by the way, would be it would probably be the type of crowd that would attend would be very responsive and able to work with the local authorities and spread themselves out. I don't know that you could go as far as doing something like they did in Trinity Bellwoods, creating large circles all over the place, which could get very expensive, but that is also something that you could consider as you develop your plans.
Is that enough? Did you get some sense of help there, Charles?
Yes, thank you very much. If I may ask a quick question, the large circles can be expensive, you're saying? We had thought about maybe doing it ourselves with chalk or something like that, but I don't know whether somebody was hired to do those circles in Trinity Bellwoods?
The City of Toronto actually did it through the Parks, Forestry and Recreation Department, and truth be told, it's FOIable. It was about $12 a circle to put those circles out there. So again, it's something you need to talk with your permitting officer about, whether you'd be able to do that on your own in a temporary fashion, and or if you could do it with, you know, large rope circles as opposed to chalk, so that you're not damaging the horticultural aspects. But again, all things that could be considered.
Okay.
Weighted hula hoops was another idea I came up with.
There you go. That's a great one.
Okay, so thank you for that. And now we're on to Beth Helmers.
Hi, thanks for listening to me today. I'm the artistic director of the Community Arts Guild, and we're a community engaged arts company in East Scarborough. We're also doing an animating parks project this year in Fred Johnson Park. And our project is working with volunteers at the Scarborough Village Garden to create some artwork for their Harvest Festival. And initially we were planning to do workshops with camps with kids and some seniors groups, and obviously lots of people that we're not interacting with right now. Instead, we've been doing remote oral history interviews with the garden volunteers. We're creating packages of art activities that are going to some of the residents nearby, and doing socially distant events with small groups, especially just the people who live close by and the gardeners. And I guess my question is, when I had asked this question, I wasn't aware that we were able to get permits for any kind of event. So what we are hoping to do in the fall is, for their annual Harvest Festival, create a physically distanced parade with some of the artwork we've been making over the summer, and have some live musicians perform, as well as some of the garden volunteers and nearby people bring things that they make and be part of the parade. So just thinking about the kinds of considerations for health and safety, we're planning to choreograph it with people far apart and only have a certain number of people in the garden. So I guess, what's the limitations on the number? Like, what is the permit for at this phase? Is it 50 people gathering outside? And I just, what are kind of the parameters at this time? And what kind of, I guess, backlog is there on processing those permits? Like, would it be reasonable to get a permit for an event in mid-September at this point?
It's the Matt show, so go ahead.
I'm going to be busy, I think. Thank you for the question. So again, it's a very specific scenario. So the stage 3, when we do enter stage 3, the outside gathering limits are for 100 people. That does not include the staff that are required to execute said event. In terms of the details and the specifics of how you would execute that, if it were in September, I would reach out currently to Parks, Forestry and Recreation. And to your question, is there a backlog? Truth be told, that a lot of staff during the early parts of COVID were redeployed to deal with essential services. And a lot of them are starting to be brought back. So you may experience a slowdown in that, and you may experience a little bit of a lag in the time when you submit your information and get back to them. But if what I have been told is correct, and I believe it is Parks will take the permits and they will discuss it with you. Again, whether they'll approve it or not will all depend on what your health and safety measures are surrounding COVID and what it looks like. And I think once the TPH document comes out, it will give you a good sense of how you can create and devise that plan to execute what it is you're looking to do. So I think you have to, one, talk to the permitting officer very soon, or at least put an application in very soon. And they have indicated that as soon as we enter into stage 3, they will start accepting applications.
Okay, is that enough for you for now, Beth?
That's great, thanks very much.
Okay, so next we're gonna move on, and thank you, Matt. You're on. We're gonna be now moving on to Michael Morey from Tapestry Music.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for having me on. I'm Michael Morey, the Artistic Director of Tapestry Opera. We're a contemporary opera company, just turned 40 this year. So My question is about, I guess, how we can make things simple. So I belong to a group of artistic directors of performing arts companies in Toronto who have been meeting every sort of bi-weekly to talk through the COVID process. And for the majority of companies who are used to performing indoors, there's a lot of concern, obviously, that there are few viable opportunities for engaging with audiences safely. Mm-hmm. And considering that the science has proven that outdoor is the safest, and certainly the numbers, we can see 50 versus 100, we're already gauging that is safer outdoors than indoors. And considering the relatively short warm season in Canada, I guess the question is there a way that the city or the city and the provincial government can simplify the process for performing arts groups to have outdoor performances? For example, standardizing the process, working with a third-party group who licenses it. The fact is that most of us work with a venue who controls most of the conditions when we do produce. I would say most of the organizations aren't venued organizations. So forcing everyone to also create all of the venue conditions by making all of the responsibilities theirs to make their audiences safe is adding additional burden to a lot of smaller and fragile mid-sized companies. So again, is there a way to standardize things or work with a third party who standardizes them for us to act as a venue for outdoor spaces that could include parks, parking lots, and any public spaces that are large enough to be safe?
It's Matt again. Thank you for the question. I do agree with you that, when you're in a controlled venue, it's a lot easier, and that when you do come out into the public realm, the burden you're talking of is obviously a financial one in a lot of cases for groups. The unfortunate reality for the city is we are also in that financial burden area right now. In terms of standardizing it, I think it's an interesting conversation that we could engage in. But again, the various venues are permitted by different city divisions. Whether one kind of catch-all program would work in, let's say, a road versus a park is one of the kind of conversations that would have to take place. I don't have an answer for you on that particularly, but I can look you up after this and we can have a conversation about that and see if there's any opportunity to try and figure something like that out.
So it's Sally Hahn just chiming in here. Hi, Michael, how are
Sally.
you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. I think that's actually a really, really good idea for us to think about, partly with some of the partners that we brought on for FORAC and BAM, just to figure out if there were certain, I understand exactly what you're talking about, and the idea of creating certain kinds of designs for at least parking lots, or at least, because in some ways the drive-ins were done that way, or at least flat parks or something like that, that would have a maximum of 100 people. So understanding that no matter what, we're going to stay within the guidelines of 100 people. I think that's worth exploring. I don't, like Matt says, I'm in 100% complete agreement with that. We're working flat out. We don't have like lots of extra bodies to throw at these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But partly what we have is connections with people who are interested in helping and want to partner. And I think that's a great suggestion. So I think we should try to follow it up in some way. That's the only thing I wanted to say, but it's a great suggestion.
Great. And I did open this idea up to the group of artistic directors, and there was a majority of senior artistic directors of great organizations in the city who would be willing to be involved in that. And I think there might even be some money that could come from our side, because I think it's the reinventing the wheel that might prevent a lot of companies from doing anything.
Right. I think that collaborative side on your end, with some collaboration on our end, we might come to some like workable solutions that are both financially feasible and logistically feasible. And you're right, we don't have a huge amount of time. We're looking between now and early November for people to actually withstand being outdoors. Okay.
Yeah, but I think to that point, if we can test it out now, that might be what we have to live with in April and May and June next year. Correct. So it's good for us to at least pilot something. And the other idea, I'm just going to put it out there, no one has to respond to it, is if we take the venued companies, the companies who are used to running a venue, and they can take over specific spaces, that might be one way to drive some revenue towards them, but also they're doing something that is their specialty already. So that's just to put out there, but thank you again for the time.
Well,
And
love the fact that you're thinking outside the box and also that you're collaborating with a number of other organizations. I think that's the way we're all going to get through this. And one thing I wanted to add for everybody is that our Arts in the Parks program, through what we're managing through the Toronto Arts Foundation, which promotes the work of animating Toronto Parks grant recipients, but also others. So if you are doing work in the park, please get in touch with us at the foundation, because we can support your work through the website, through promotion, and through other assistance, even if, and possibly some other logistical help. So I'm knocking at the door. Thanks.
Michael, that was a great question. I want to please accept my apologies for saying, naming your company incorrectly. I know it's Tapestry Opera, so I apologize. And now we're going to hear from Michael Murray.
Hi, nice to come right after Michael Murray, and our two names are so similar in so many contexts. Michael, we've never actually met in person. Nice to meet you. So my name is Michael Adam Murray. I'm the Executive Director of the Toronto Musicians Association, a professional association and union of 2,900 musicians in the GTA. Our members were fairly encouraged by many of the guidelines in the province's Stage 3 framework. And we look forward, we thought under those guidelines, there was a real window to getting back to work and performances, weddings, ceremonies, bars, and restaurants. I know bars are sensitive right now. We were wondering, can the City of Toronto deviate from provincial Stage 3 guidelines? And if so, does the city plan any deviations that could impact musicians and the arts and cultural sector?
Who wants to take that, Matt?
I'll take that one. It's unfortunately a relatively short answer. You know, when you talk about deviation, the provincial guidelines, we as the City of Toronto are subject to those guidelines as well. However, as you've seen recently, to your point about bars and the like, the City of Toronto can ask for additional conditions through the province. Now, unfortunately, that's going in the wrong direction from what you're looking for. But the unfortunate reality is that we have to follow those guidelines. So any deviation would have to come through official channels at a high level up to the province. However, there is in the document that I talked about a reopening guidelines piece that allows you to connect directly with the province and have that conversation as well. And if, like the previous caller, the previous video caller, there is an association or a group, and it sounds like from yourself there are many behind you, whether that holds any weight in addressing that concern for your specific sector, I encourage you to reach out to them directly. But again, the situation is fluid, so it'll all depend on how we do in Stage 3 in terms of this. And if you're thinking about opening in Stage 3 and need those guidance now, I encourage you to go directly to the province.
Okay. And does anybody else have anything to add to Matt's answer? Okay, moving on. Our next person up with a great question is Heather Irvin.
Hi, I'm Heather, and I'm the Communications and Development Manager at Arts Etobicoke. And we are also working on an Animating Toronto Parks program, so I'm assuming this question will also be for Matt. We, along with our partner, Delta Family Resource Center, are adapting our 3-day park party model into 2 months of micro workshops. The workshops will feature a variety of arts and cultural activities and be multidisciplinary. The adaptation allows us to maintain a connection with our community while also keeping the impact of the original project and the idea of the project and keeping everyone safe. So we have created our own health and safety protocols based on the guidelines from Toronto Public Health and through the province, and been sort of working on that in advance. And we know that the permits for larger gatherings are on hold and won't be opening up until Stage 3, but we find ourselves in a unique predicament where we are in need of a permit for activities that normally wouldn't require one. For instance, these micro workshops in the park are only for groups of 7, but we want to have a storage pod on site to store our PPE and other health and safety items, like our extra tents to spread out safe shade stanchions to demarcate safe distances, hand washing stations, etc. Are there special considerations for activities such as these, and could we get guidance on permitting for storage pod and safety equipment under this type of a project?
So I'll start. I'm not sure if Sally, you have anything to add. I know you guys are familiar with the arts in the park. I mean, with any permit, there are obviously conditions, whether it's a long-term. So it sounds like you've taken 3 days and you're spreading it out over many weeks now because you have to kind of in the outside environment. Park staff in the permitting offices, you won't see specific guidelines around pod storage, around those types of things. You'd have to discuss that directly with the permitting officer, whether you could actually find a spot or a location within the park where you could actually store that and store those materials. Yeah. And they would need to advise on where that can go. The big thing is just addressing their concerns over impacts to the horticultural aspects of the space. Is there a parking lot close by where it could potentially be dropped? The security concerns around it being left there and what could happen if somebody breaks in or damages would be things that they would be wanting to know about. So I think it's in all cases extremely probable and possible, but again, you have to talk directly with the public health officer.
Right. And I guess the question on that is, like, so we have reached out to sort of start that process, and I think the answer is that they didn't know because it's not a large festival gathering. It's for small gatherings, so it's kind of in a gray area. So that's sort of what we were hoping to get to.
In our understanding, like even now under stage 2, our colleagues in parks asked us to make it very clear that activities allowed in stage 2 reopening, which would be gatherings of under 10 people, they would be able to discuss that directly, and they wanted to be able to issue permits. So I'm not sure whether parks has gotten back to you yet on that particular piece. If they haven't, I would encourage you to again reach back out to them. But again, it doesn't sound overly complex. I mean, with your particular example, you're talking about smaller numbers that are manageable within a space and provide a great community service. So it's probably one of the ones that's a lot more manageable for them to deal with. So I would be interested to know the result of it, to be quite honest with you.
Well, happy to share.
Send me an email to the Culture TO email once you've talked to them.
Will do, thank you.
And Claire, did you have anything to add? No?
Well, I was going to put it in the chat, but I could just mention it now. I think, you can also think about partnerships outside the park. So if there was a store, I mean, there's going to be businesses who want to encourage people coming out. Or there might be a basement in an apartment building nearby. And in this way, you may be able to speed up the knowns in terms of going ahead with your project. You can still keep the questions going with the parks. But we do know from our experience with arts in the parks that it is quite difficult to get storage space in the parks. And some groups have worked with park supervisors for years. So if you can really look at some workarounds in local businesses, try to make some alliances, I think we're all in this together. And you may make some new friends.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Claire. And we have another question coming up. We have Alexandra Yorgu.
Hi. Do I have sound now? Yes. Thank you, Maxine. So I'm Alexandra Yorgu. I'm an Etobicoke artist, and I received funding from the Toronto Arts Council to make a community art project. And after I've been on hold with the project for several months and I consulted the respiratory specialists, I decided to go ahead with the project. And I got a ton of clay delivered at my house. I'm very grateful for Tucker's Pottery for custom cutting the clay in smaller chunks so I can deliver it. And so far I delivered close to 800 kilograms of clay to people who signed up through my website. I'm doing contactless delivery, totally covering myself. I'm always protecting myself when I'm managing the supplies, and I'm leaving them at the doorsteps and then I'm walking away. To be able to do this project, it was an incredible amount of work for me to not only promote it, to make the how-to videos, to make a new website page, to make sign-up sheets. So my question is, how can the city help artists like me who want to do a project in the community? Can they maybe create a platform where community members can see projects happening and they can see a video about the project? and then they can click and sign up right away? And also, can they create a platform where I can showcase the outcome of the project? Because I'm getting beautiful, beautiful sculptures that people are making. I forgot to mention, everybody's making a symbolic clay shoe. They're mixing the clay with forest edge seeds, and then they're returning the clay to nature. It's an ephemeral sculpture installation. The sculpture is going to grow. And everybody's working in the comfort of their own homes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Maxine, this one's not me.
Really? Now who's going to answer that one?
So it's Sally. Yeah, I'll talk a little about it. So right now, currently with the city's COVID response going on right now, what we can put out through our channels on a communications level is very, very limited. That's including for us ourselves. For example, one of the reasons why I spent a little bit of time at the beginning announcing the book award deadlines and announcing the deadlines for the artworks grants, etc., is that the Strategic Communications Office is centrally controlling messaging going out, primarily because they need the messaging to be about public health and physical distancing above all, and then about some reopening phases. So we don't have access to our normal channels. Even within the Economic Development Culture Division, a lot of our channels have been shut down, both on social media, etc. Which is why, for example, many of you here will know that in terms of things like trying to get news out, many of us, Pat Tobin, myself, Claire, I know we are in fact using Instagram and LinkedIn and social media channels to communicate, because we're not officially doing it through the city. Even at the best of times when we're all operating normally, the city does not normally undertake advertising for or communications or marketing for other individual projects. It's just a case of volume. Their volume, there's 20,000 events within a year, probably more. We can't actually fairly decide a policy in which we advertise or promote one thing over the other. That said, there are a few channels that I'd like you to be aware of. So right now, for special projects like what you're doing, which sounds absolutely fascinating, the city is putting out a weekly newsletter called Culture TO. And that newsletter is being put out through with the permission of Strategic Communications once a week on Thursday afternoons. And so we're trying to highlight some of the activities going on in the culture sector. So that's something that, if you send me the information, I can try to get it out in a newsletter at least once. One of the things that will be upcoming for you and for every artist, we hope, across the city, will be sort of a much longer recovery program called, well, I won't even announce it now, but we are looking to be able to try to engage both economic, social, and cultural groups right across the whole city. So that may be a platform later on. It's not immediately available right now. And then again, I would actually point to other channels like Claire's own Neighborhood Arts Network in order to amplify your message. One of the things that the city is very, very concerned about is the lack of ability for people in their neighborhoods to connect with their local arts activity and artists. Mm-hmm. And that's especially when people are doing much of the searching online, that whole issue of discoverability, of you being able to advertise within your own networks and that being amplified and picked up, that's really hard right now. And so we are trying to work with partners to start a pilot project where we increase the discoverability of Toronto arts and culture to Toronto arts and culture neighborhoods. It's not that far along yet, but we do believe that it's a really, really important problem that you've mentioned. Finally, and I'm sure you're already doing it, but there are in fact a lot of local-based social media platforms. So things like Nextdoor, various, WhatsApp chat groups, if you get into them, very specific geographically based Facebook groups and other groups. Those are the only other channels that I know where you can at least directly contact your neighbors in a way, the ones that you can deliver the clay to. Like, I'm amazed by how much clay delivery you've done. That's fantastic. But in terms of doing those kinds of things, trying at least to use some of the existing networks online that are based about your local community. In terms of at least my community, there's at least 7 different platforms that people use to communicate their local neighborhood stuff.
Yes.
If there's a BIA in your neighborhood area, that's also a good group.
Thank you. I've tried all those, and usually I get 5-10 people to sign up, and then it gets covered by other content, and then there's a pause. And it would be nice if it can be official, because it was a City of Toronto grant. And also I would love to showcase the work. So this is like in the months ahead. It would be lovely if I can have some kind of a virtual exhibit somehow to show the outcome. But thank you for all the ideas.
The one last question is, are you connected with a local art service or organization? Like,
Yes, I am. I'm in touch with Arts Etobicoke. They helped me. I took over their account last week to talk about the project. Yes, thank you.
Good.
Well, very quickly, because I know we have to wrap up, but it's a beautiful project, Alexandra. And I know that you want to honor the work of the community members who are really expressing their creativity around this project. And I'm just wondering, I don't know whether Michael Morey is still on this session, but perhaps there's a way that arts organizations can help each other. If you're looking for a way to honor and showcase the work, or you could reach out to some local library branches who might think this is a wonderful thing to showcase. Perhaps even connect up with Joe Sellers at Year of Public Art if these objects will last into next year, or other ways that the arts community can sort of help each other in this, because it is about honoring this fantastic work that is happening right now. And sometimes it's actually faster to move with colleagues, and the Neighborhood Arts Network could help you here, or just reaching out to a few other artists and arts organizations so that this work could be honored. But anyway, congratulations for the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Alexandra. So we tried to cram an awful lot into a very short period of time. There was an awful lot of information that was shared. I know that staff are going to post, they're going to transcribe, and they're going to post our session today. So look out for that on the City of Toronto's website sometime, I think, early next week. And then in terms of the presentations, they're also going to make sure these are either emailed out to people or they will be attached to the website on the whatever the lovely Rachel Kennedy is going to do. She's so fantastic. She'll take care of it. So stay tuned. Check that out next week. I do know that I learned a lot about the reopening of the city. And I also want to say that our key words are pivot, ambiguity, constant change, collaboration, and be nice to each other. And please, people, wear your masks. Please wear your masks. Thank you very much for joining us all today. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, David. I know Matt had to leave. And thank you for the other David who's been doing some stellar work on our ASL. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye, people. Thank you.